Your soulmate is crying with happiness right now because at 7:12 this evening, in front of a completely silent theater, you finally did the one thing they had secretly wanted for you long before they ever wanted you back. You sat down at a piano in public for the first time in nearly 8 years, placed both hands over the keys, looked toward the violinist waiting beside you, and played the opening notes of a piece you had sworn nobody would ever hear completed. Your soulmate was not in the theater. They were sitting alone at home when their friend Tessa sent them a 12-second video with only 4 words beneath it: "You need to see this." At first your soulmate thought the person at the piano only looked like you. Then you turned slightly toward the audience, and they saw your face. They saw your hands. They saw the small silver metronome placed beside the music stand. And then they heard the melody. Your soulmate's phone almost slipped from their hand. They knew that melody. They had heard you play fragments of it late at night when you thought they were asleep. They had heard you stop at exactly the same place every time, measure 214, halfway through a rising phrase where the piano was supposed to surrender the melody to a violin. You never played beyond it. Never. Tonight, for the first time, you reached measure 214 and did not stop. Instead, you lifted your eyes toward the young violinist standing beside you. She raised her bow, breathed once, and played the missing line. Your soulmate covered their mouth and began crying before the piece was even finished, because the person sitting beside you was occupying a chair you had kept empty for 8 years. The chair that once belonged to your younger brother, Noah. And that is what you finally did. You did not forget him. You did something much harder. You allowed the music to continue without him. But your soulmate's happiness is not only about the performance. They learned something 3 hours before you walked onto that stage, something about Noah, about the unfinished piece, and about the final argument that ended your relationship. Something that made them realize they had misunderstood the deepest reason you kept refusing to move forward. And there is one detail from tonight's performance that even your soulmate does not understand yet, because the violinist beside you was not chosen by accident. 8 years earlier, you and Noah were known around your neighborhood as the impossible pair. You played piano and composed. Noah played violin and had the irritating ability to hear one melody once and remember it forever. You were careful, organized, always carrying pencils and spare sheet music. Noah arrived 5 minutes late to almost everything and somehow still looked surprised when people mentioned it. You complained about his timing. He complained that you treated rehearsal like surgery. Yet musically, both of you understood one another before a sentence needed to be finished. The piece that eventually became so important had started as a joke. One winter evening, the two of you were rehearsing inside an old municipal arts center called Marlowe Hall when the heating failed. Noah was wearing gloves with the fingertips cut off, and you were refusing to leave because you had found a progression you liked. He played a counter melody over it. You stopped and stared at him. "Do that again." Noah smiled. "So now you admit I'm useful." You threw a pencil at him. He played it again. Over the next 6 months, that little argument became a 22-minute composition for piano and violin. Noah named it the open window because he said your piano part sounded like somebody trying to escape a room while his violin kept opening doors you had not noticed. You planned to premiere it together at Marlowe Hall's spring concert. It was not supposed to launch careers or change anyone's life. It was simply yours. Two brothers who had spent years making music finally performing something they had created together. The afternoon before the concert, you realized 2 pages of the revised score were still in Noah's apartment. You called him and said, "Bring them when you come." Noah complained that you had changed the ending too many times. You told him that was because his ending was terrible. He told you your face was terrible. You hung up laughing. Noah never reached Marlowe Hall. A driver lost control at an intersection less than a mile away. Noah died before you made it to the hospital. For years afterward, one sentence lived inside you like a fact: I asked him to come, you had called. You had asked for the missing pages. You had insisted he bring them before the performance. People told you the accident was not your fault. You understood the logic. Logic did nothing. Every time you sat at a piano, you remembered the phone call. Every time you saw measure 214, you remembered that the violin line waiting on the other side belonged to somebody who never arrived to play it. You stopped performing almost immediately. Not music entirely. That was impossible. You taught. You arranged pieces for schools. You played accompaniment for children who needed somebody patient enough to follow their nervous tempo. But when anyone asked you to perform your own work, you refused. The open window disappeared into a blue folder in the bottom drawer of your desk, where it remained untouched for years. That was the version of you your soulmate met. They were not a musician. That helped. Your soulmate worked as a stage lighting designer and had been hired for a small youth production at Marlowe Hall. You were accompanying rehearsals. The first time you spoke, they asked whether you could move the piano 6 feet to the left because it was blocking a lighting angle. You stared at the instrument, then at them. This piano weighs 400 kilograms. Your soulmate looked at the stage crew. So that's a no? You said, that is an invitation for you to develop a second lighting angle. They thought you were rude. You thought they were demanding. 3 weeks later, you were having dinner together. What drew them toward you was not mystery. It was how present you were with everyone except yourself. A frightened child forgot her song during rehearsal and you quietly changed the accompaniment so nobody in the audience noticed. A teenager broke a violin string 10 minutes before an audition and you spent 20 minutes making jokes until his hands stopped shaking. You could recognize panic in other people before they recognized it themselves. Yet whenever somebody complimented your own playing, you changed the subject. Your soulmate noticed the locked drawer after about 4 months. They never opened it. One night you did. You took out the blue folder and showed them the first page of the open window. Noah's handwritten violin markings were everywhere. Jokes in the margins. Arrows. Complaints about your tempo. At measure 214, the notation ended. Your soulmate asked, "You never finished it?" You looked at the page. No, do you want to? No, the answer came too quickly. They did not push. That restraint mattered. For nearly 2 years, your soulmate never asked you to perform the piece. They did not tell you healing required finishing it. They did not suggest Noah would want you to move on. They understood enough to know that people who are grieving hear those sentences until the words become almost meaningless. Instead, they fell in love with the life that existed around the silence. Sunday breakfasts. Grocery store arguments. Your habit of leaving cups everywhere except the kitchen. Their terrible attempt to learn piano, which ended when you told them they were playing with the emotional sensitivity of falling furniture. They retaliated by designing an entire lighting cue for one of your student concerts that turned your piano bright pink during the final bow. You were good together. Then a 17-year-old violinist named June entered your studio. June was not extraordinary in the effortless way Noah had been. She worked for everything. If a passage took other students 10 attempts, June played it 50 times. She stayed after lessons to ask questions. She wrote fingerings in 4 different colors. She became the sort of student you pretended not to be especially invested in while somehow remembering every audition date she had. One afternoon, June arrived carrying an old photocopied score she had found in Marlowe Hall's archive. The open window. Only the first movement. Your face changed the moment you saw it. Where did you get this? The library box downstairs. Give it to me. June immediately did. Then she asked, "Did you write it?" You looked at Noah's name beside yours. "My brother and I did." "Can I hear it?" "No, you put the pages away." That should have been the end. It was not. A few weeks later, June performed one of Noah's favorite etudes during a student recital. You stood backstage listening. Your soulmate happened to be working lighting that night. They saw you close your eyes when June played a particular phrase. Later, they found you sitting alone in the dark auditorium. Your soulmate did not mention Noah. They simply sat beside you. After a long silence you said, "She has the same bad habit he did." What? Rushes when she gets excited. Your soulmate smiled. You look happy when you complain about him. You laughed once. Then the conversation changed. For the first time, you told your soulmate about measure 214. About how Noah was supposed to enter there. About how every attempt to continue felt less like finishing music and more like allowing someone else to answer a sentence he had started. Your soulmate asked, "Do you think another violinist would be replacing him?" Yes. Even if you chose them? Yes. They nodded. No argument. That was why what happened later hurt so much. A year passed. June received an invitation to audition for the National Conservatory. She needed a contemporary duet. Against your better judgment, she asked whether she could perform part of The Open Window with you. You said no. She accepted it. But your soulmate saw something after June left. You opened the blue folder. For the first time in years, you played measure 214. You stopped. Started again. Stopped. Then quietly wrote one new note on the blank page. Your soulmate watched from the hallway without interrupting. Over the next month, you began composing again. Secretly at first. Then openly. Not the open window. Other things. A short piano work. A piece for one of your students. A small melody that your soulmate heard you humming while cooking. They believed something was changing. So did you. Then Marlowe Hall announced that its main theater would close temporarily for renovation. The director wanted the final concert before closure to celebrate artists who had grown up in the building. Somebody nominated you. You refused. The director asked again. No. June asked. No. Your soulmate said nothing. That silence confused you. Finally, you asked, aren't you going to tell me I should do it? Your soulmate answered, would you? No, then why would I? You looked at them. They continued, I want you to perform when you want to perform. I don't want to become another person standing beside the piano telling you what healing is supposed to look like. You kissed them. That could have been the end of the issue. Then life put pressure somewhere else. Your soulmate received an offer to design lighting for a touring theater company. 8 months traveling between cities. It was the opportunity they had wanted for years. They nearly declined without telling you. You found the email. Why haven't you answered? They said, because 8 months is a long time. So? They looked at you. So us. You stared at them. Take it. They became almost angry. That easy? It isn't easy. You didn't even think. I've been thinking since I saw your face when you read the offer. Your soulmate said they did not want to leave you alone in a city where you had already built your life around memories. That sentence hit the wrong place. You answered, I am not asking you to stay. I know. Then go. Why do you keep making everything sound like leaving is the healthiest option? You became quiet. They continued, sometimes I can't tell whether you're giving me freedom or making sure nobody gets close enough to become necessary. You looked away. That was the first time your soulmate realized there was another layer to your grief. It was not only that you feared losing people. You had begun arranging your life so nobody could ever accuse you of being the reason they stayed, came, changed plans, or got hurt. Noah had been coming to your concert. You had asked him to bring the score. That accident had quietly turned one ordinary request into something dangerous inside you. Your soulmate said, I want the tour. I also want you. Those things are allowed to exist at the same time. You replied, then take the tour. Again, no fight. No request. No vulnerability. That hurt them. They asked, would you ask me to stay if that's what you wanted? You could not answer. Not because you wanted them gone. Because asking someone you loved to alter their route for you had become emotionally tangled with the worst night of your life. Your soulmate did not understand that yet. They heard something else. If you want to go, go. It began creating distance. They accepted the tour. For months, both of you tried long distance. Some weeks were good. Others were almost entirely missed calls and exhausted messages. Your soulmate came home whenever they could. You visited twice. There was still love. But every major choice exposed the same wound. Your soulmate would ask, "What do you want?" You would answer, "I want you to choose what's right for you." Eventually they said, "That is not an answer about you." You knew. You still could not give another one. Then came the argument neither of you forgot. Your soulmate's touring company offered them a permanent position in another city. They did not know whether to accept. They asked whether you could imagine moving someday. You said maybe. They asked whether you could imagine leaving Marlowe Hall. You went quiet. They immediately regretted asking. But you were already defensive. This isn't about Marlowe. Then what is it about? I don't know. You always know what everyone else should be brave enough to choose. That isn't fair. No. It isn't. Because when it's your turn to want something, suddenly wanting becomes dangerous. You stood up. Your soulmate's eyes filled. Then they said the sentence that stayed with you long after the relationship ended. I don't need you to choose me over your brother. I need you to stop making every empty chair prove that you loved him. Silence. The moment the words left their mouth, they wanted them back. You stared at them as though they had struck you. Your soulmate whispered, "I'm sorry." You said nothing. They approached. You stepped away. That movement ended more than the argument. 3 weeks later, you separated. Not because your soulmate left for somebody else. Not because you stopped loving each other. The relationship simply became a place where one person kept asking for an honest desire and the other kept hearing that desire as a possible burden. Your soulmate took the permanent theater position. You stayed. For months, neither of you spoke. Then something happened that your soulmate knew nothing about. June returned to your studio carrying a tiny digital recorder. She had found it inside a box her mother kept for years. You recognized it instantly. It had belonged to Noah. But why did June's mother have it? That was when June told you something you had never known. Before Noah died, he had volunteered twice a month at an after-school music program. June had been 9 years old. He was her first violin tutor. You had never connected the child Noah occasionally mentioned with the 17-year-old who later became your student because her surname had changed after her mother remarried. June's mother found the recorder while moving house. Most files were ordinary rehearsals. Then June said, "There's one with your name." You could not touch the device. She left it with you anyway. For 5 months, you did not play it. That is important. People around you would have called it the answer. Closure. A final message from Noah. You were not ready. So the recorder remained beside the blue folder. Then your soulmate accidentally learned about it. Not from you. From June. Months after the breakup, your soulmate returned to Marlowe Hall to collect old lighting equipment. June recognized them. She asked whether the two of you were still together. Your soulmate said no. June looked disappointed, then mentioned the recorder. Your soulmate froze. Did they listen? No, are you sure? June nodded. Your soulmate almost called you that night. They did not. Because they had finally understood that loving you did not give them the right to turn Noah's voice into a deadline. So they waited. Then 3 weeks ago, June contacted your soulmate again. She had been accepted into the conservatory. Her graduation recital would be held at the renovated Marlowe Hall. She said, they agreed to accompany me. Your soulmate smiled. Then June added, but not on the piece. Meaning the open window. Your soulmate said, that's okay. June sounded surprised. You don't think they should finish it? Your soulmate answered, I think they should get to decide what finishing means. That sentence eventually reached you. June told you. You said nothing. But that night, for the first time, you picked up Noah's recorder. The file carrying your name was 43 seconds long. There was background noise. Noah was clearly walking somewhere. He sounded annoyed. You changed the ending again. I saw the pages. I'm coming early because if I let you play that terrible version in public, our family will never recover. You laughed when you heard it. Then stopped breathing. Noah continued, also, stop calling me to remind me. I was already coming. I promised June I'd let her hear the soundcheck because she thinks concert halls are magic. You replayed it. Already coming. Noah had already planned to be at Marlowe Hall before you called about the missing pages. Your phone call had not put him on that road. The score had not put him there. You had carried a causal connection for 8 years that had never existed. But Noah was not finished. His voice softened. And if you're still obsessing over measure 214, leave the space. Somebody will know what to do with it one day. Then the recording ended. For 8 years, you had believed measure 214 belonged only to the person who died before playing it. Noah had described it differently. A space. Something another musician might enter. You cried for almost an hour. Then you called June. Not your soulmate. June. You asked, are you still looking for a duet for graduation? She went silent. Then whispered, seriously? You said, I have conditions. She started laughing. Of course you do. You reopened the open window. The original score remained exactly as it had been. You did not erase Noah's markings. You did not rewrite his violin part to make it sound like somebody else. Instead, you finished the composition from measure 214 forward with June beside you. Whenever she asked whether Noah would have liked a change, you answered, "I don't know." That mattered. You stopped pretending the dead could be consulted for permission. You made decisions with the living musician sitting beside you. Then you made another decision. You did not tell your soulmate. Not because you wanted revenge. Because you knew something had changed in them too, and you did not want the performance to become bait. No secret invitation. No seat reserved with their name. No message saying, "Come see what I finally did." Tonight was not about winning them back. It was about playing. At 7:08 p.m., June walked onto the Marlowe Hall stage. The renovated theater looked completely different, but the piano sat almost exactly where it had 8 years earlier. You followed. There was one empty chair near the wings. Stage crew had placed it there accidentally. You noticed. For a moment, you stopped walking. June noticed too. She whispered, "Do you want me to move it?" Years earlier, your answer would have been yes. Tonight you shook your head. "It's just a chair." Then you sat down. At 7:12, you began. That is the video Tessa sent your soulmate. They watched the first 12 seconds. Then found the live stream. They saw you reach measure 214. Your hands slowed. The theater became completely silent. For one terrifying second, your soulmate thought you would stop again. You did not. June lifted the violin. The melody continued. Your soulmate began sobbing. Tessa called. "Are you okay?" Your soulmate laughed through tears. "Yes." Then, they finally did it. Tessa assumed they meant you finally returned to performance. Your soulmate knew it was bigger. You had finally allowed a future moment to exist without treating it as a betrayal of a past one. And then something happened that made them cry even harder. At the end of the open window, you did not dedicate the piece to Noah. Everyone expected you to. Instead, you spoke into the microphone and said, "My brother wrote much of the violin language you heard tonight. For years I thought protecting that meant leaving part of this piece silent. I was wrong. Music is not protected by preventing anyone else from touching it. It is protected by letting it keep becoming music." You turned toward June. Then, "Thank you for refusing to be afraid of an empty measure." The audience stood. You did not. You looked down at the piano and smiled. Then June did something not listed in the program. She placed Noah's old digital recorder on the piano. You looked surprised. She said something the microphones barely caught. "Now tell them the other part." You laughed nervously. The audience waited. You picked up the recorder. Then said, "I spent 8 years believing my brother was on his way to this hall because I asked him to come. 3 weeks ago I learned he was already coming." Your soulmate covered their face. That was the first time they heard the truth. You continued, "Grief can turn a sentence into evidence if you repeat it long enough. Mine was, I asked him to come." I built a lot of my life around those 5 words. Then you paused. Tonight I'm trying a different sentence. The room waited. He wanted to be here. Your soulmate cried so hard they had to stop watching for several seconds. Because suddenly your entire relationship looked different. Every time you refused to ask them to stay. Every time you answered their desire with, "Choose what is right for you." Every time you avoided becoming the reason someone changed direction. You had not been emotionally detached. You had been living beneath a belief that asking someone you loved to come toward you could have irreversible consequences. Your soulmate had been right about one thing. That fear had hurt the relationship. But they had been wrong about the meaning. You were not afraid of choosing them. You were afraid your choice might become a weight they carried. And you had been wrong too. You had turned freedom into distance. Your soulmate finally understood both truths at once. The performance ended at 7:36. By 7:44, messages were everywhere. Former students. Old friends. Teachers. People who had not heard you perform since Noah died. Your soulmate wrote nothing. Not yet. They watched the replay once. Then again. At 8:03, June sent them a private message. They listened because of something you said. Your soulmate stared at it. What? June explained that she had told you what your soulmate said weeks earlier. They should get to decide what finishing means. You had gone silent. June said that night was when you finally picked up the recorder. Your soulmate sat completely still. They had spent months believing the final argument destroyed you. The empty chair sentence had been cruel in the moment. But after the relationship ended, they had learned not to repeat the same pressure in a gentler form. They stopped trying to decide when you should heal. And strangely, the moment they stopped pushing, even indirectly, something in you became safe enough to choose. But that still was not the deepest reveal. At 8:21, June sent another photograph. It showed the final page of the open window. Your soulmate zoomed in. Under the last bar, you had written a short note. Not Noah's name. Not June's. 4 words, "No one plays alone." Your soulmate recognized the sentence. They had said it to you years earlier after a terrible student recital where you apologized because one child froze on stage and you had improvised beside her until she found her place again. You had shrugged afterward. "I barely did anything." Your soulmate answered, "No one plays alone." That was the whole point. You remembered. Years later, you put their words beneath the first piece you had finally allowed yourself to finish. Your soulmate stared at the photograph. Tessa asked, "Are you going to message them?" Your soulmate said, "Not tonight." Tessa was surprised. "You've wanted this for months." No, your soulmate wiped their eyes. "I wanted them to play again." "That's what I mean." "No. You mean I wanted this to bring them back to me." They looked at the video paused on your face. "I don't." That was the truth. Of course they still loved you. Of course part of them wanted to hear your voice. But tonight belonged to something larger than the relationship. For once, your soulmate did not want your healing converted into romantic evidence. You played because you chose to play. You finished because you chose to finish. That deserved to remain yours. So they did nothing. And then, at 9:16 p.m., their phone vibrated. Your name. You had messaged them. Only one photograph. The final page. No one plays alone. Underneath you wrote, I remembered who said this. Your soulmate laughed through tears. They replied, I wondered if you would. Several minutes passed. Then you wrote, June told me what you said about the recorder. Your soulmate's chest tightened. I meant it. Your answer came, I know. Then, thank you for not trying to make me listen. Your soulmate stared at the message. They typed, I'm sorry I tried to make you move before I understood why you were standing still. You did not respond immediately. When you did, your answer surprised them. You weren't completely wrong. Another message. I was using grief to avoid asking people to stay. Then, I thought giving everyone maximum freedom meant I could never become a reason in their decisions. Your soulmate read that twice. They replied, and I started treating being asked as proof of being loved. You answered, we were excellent at making fear sound philosophical. Your soulmate laughed. A real laugh. Then cried again. Because that sounded like the two of you before every conversation became loaded with consequences. There was no immediate discussion of getting back together. No dramatic, I still love you. Both of you already knew the answer was more complicated than a phrase. Instead, your soulmate asked, how did it feel? You knew what they meant. The stage. Measure 214. June entering the phrase Noah never got to play. You wrote, terrible for about 10 seconds. Then normal. A pause. That was the strange part. Your soulmate understood. Sometimes the thing a person fears for years does not arrive with thunder when it finally happens. Sometimes another musician simply raises a bow. A measure passes. Then another. And suddenly a song that had been frozen for almost a decade discovers it still knows how to move. Your soulmate asked, are you going to perform again? You replied, I think so. Then, not the open window every time. I don't want Noah becoming the only reason people listen to me. Your soulmate smiled. That answer made them happier than anything else. Because it meant tonight was not a memorial disguised as a comeback. It was a beginning. You had new music. 3 unfinished pieces. A small recital offer in October. June had already threatened to tell everyone you were unbearable in rehearsal. Life was entering the story again. Then you asked your soulmate, how is the theater job? A simple question. They told you. For 20 minutes, the two of you spoke about ordinary things. A touring production. A lighting failure in Denver. June's audition. A terrible conductor. Nothing needed to be resolved. Then your soulmate finally wrote, "I'm really happy for you." You answered, "I know." They smiled at the screen. Then another message appeared. "I'm happy too." That was enough. Tonight, your soulmate is still emotional. Not because you finally chased them. You did not. Not because you made some huge declaration about the relationship. You did not. Not because you proved you had secretly been waiting. You had been living. So had they. They are crying because years ago they fell in love with a person who could make frightened children believe one wrong note did not end a song, while refusing to give themselves the same mercy. Tonight, you finally did. You reached the measure where your life had stopped. You let someone else enter. You listened to the phrase you had spent years believing belonged only to Noah. And instead of losing him, you discovered something your grief had hidden from you. The music still sounded like both of you. Noah's handwriting remained on the page. His jokes remained in the margins. His old recorder remained on the piano. Nothing about continuing erased him. The empty chair did not need to remain empty forever to prove he once sat there. And your soulmate understands now why this is bigger than any reunion could have been. Before the two of you could ever build something healthy again, if you ever do, you needed to stop believing love was safest when you never asked anybody to come toward you. And your soulmate needed to stop believing love was real only when someone asked them to stay. Tonight, neither of you has solved everything. There is still a city between you. There is still a breakup. There are still words both of you regret. But there is also a finished piece of music where there used to be silence. At Marlowe Hall, the stage crew has already removed the piano. June took her violin home. The audience is gone. The accidental empty chair has been stacked with dozens of others backstage. And on your desk tonight sits the blue folder that remained closed for 8 years. For the first time, it contains no blank pages. Your soulmate knows that now. They look at your last message again, "I'm happy too." Then they whisper something nobody hears. Good. Because that was the one thing they secretly needed. Not for you to come back. Not for you to prove you still loved them. Not even for you to forgive them. They needed to know the person they loved had finally stopped treating survival like a betrayal of the person who did not survive. And tonight, when the violin entered at measure 214 and you kept playing, your soulmate finally saw it happen. You chose the next note. Then the next. Then the next. And for the first time in 8 years, you let the song reach its ending. Which may be exactly how something new eventually begins.